Hi and welcome to TheMathsTutor.ie Leaving Cert Ordinary Level Maths Countdown. This week we're going to be looking at statistics, and we're continuing looking at statistics by looking at things like the mean and the range. As always, there's loads of resources available for our full members on the TheMathsTutor.ie website, and we make a couple of those resources available each week. So there's two videos to look at after this lesson. The first one here is on median. So that's one of the central tendencies we're going to be coming across today. So just another few examples on how you can find the median. And then the second video is a worked question, so 2016 paper 2 question 5. So hopefully you'll find those videos useful. So today we're going to start looking at mean, median, mode, range and interquartile range. And the first thing to point out to you is that on page 33 of your tables, so you'll see here on page 33, up here at the top we have our mean, and we're going to see two different formulas from a list of numbers and from a frequency table. Now these can look a little bit complicated because we're seeing a couple of unusual symbols in there. So we have this Greek letter mu, and mu just means the mean. We also use x with a line on top of it, which is called x bar, to mean the mean. So you might see both of those symbols, but in our tables, you'll see this mu symbol here to mean the mean. And then we have this fraction written on this side, and we have this, looks like a sort of an E shape, and this means the sum of. So this is sigma, and it means the sum of, which just means add together. So in one of our formulas, we're going to see the sum of x divided by n. So that's from a list of n numbers, so the number of numbers. And in the second one, we're going to see the sum of f times x over the sum of f. So that's going to be our frequency, and it's going to be from a frequency table. So we're going to see these in use, but first we're going to look at what these different terms mean and how we can work them out. So the mean is often called the average, but we actually have mean, median and mode all being different types of averages, or all being different types of centers. So when I have a set of data, we often want to find what's the average of that data. If I'm dealing with the mean, it has to be numerical data. So it has to be numbers that we can add together. So how we find the mean then is we're going to add the numbers and divide by the number of numbers. Okay, so that's what our formula says, the sum of x. So add together all the numbers that we have and then divide by the number of numbers, so how many numbers are in your list. And if we have a frequency table, we see that we can take this shortcut where we're going to introduce our frequency as well. So that's our mean. Our median then is going to be the middle number. When we have our data in ascending order. So that means that the data is going to be listed from smallest to biggest, and then we're going to find our middle number. So when data listed as smallest to biggest. So again, the median can only be used for numerical data because it has to be numbers. So I'm looking for the middle number when the data is listed from smallest to biggest. The mode I can use for numerical data, or I can use it for categorical data. And it has its value, so that some people say, oh, the mode isn't as important as the mean, but it definitely has its value. And you'll see some questions where we're going to be needing to find a mode, but the mode is the most frequent. So the one that's there the most on my list is called the mode. And all three of those M words are centers. So when I have this data, I'm looking for what sort of a middle center, especially my mean and my median, where we're looking at numbers. So we're looking for a center. And then we look at a spread. And when we're looking at a spread, we look at two things this week called the range and the interquartile range. So the range is going to be how spread out the numbers are. And it's always the biggest value minus the smallest value. So it's whatever your biggest number is minus your smallest number, and that's when we have them in order is the easiest way to pick out what the biggest and the smallest is. And the last one that we're going to look at today is the interquartile range, and you'll often see this written as the IQR, and the IQR is written as Q3 minus Q1. So Q3 is called the upper quartile, and Q1 is called the lower quartile. Now, where these come from is we're basically dividing our data into quarters. So 1/4 of the way up is Q1, the lower quartile, and 3/4 of the way up is going to be Q3, the upper quartile. So that gives a bit of an explanation of the terms that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to try all of these with this list of numbers. So we have a list of numbers here that says 2, 5, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, 12, 12, 15, 20, 26, 28, 29, and 30. So before I start into these, the first thing that I'm noticing about them is that they're in order from smallest to biggest. So that means I don't have to reorder them to start using my mean, my median, my mode, my range, and my interquartile range. So we're going to work our way through all of these. So the first thing we're going to calculate is we're going to calculate the mean. So when I have a list of numbers, I'm using the first formula here on page 33, which says the sum of x divided by n. So this is the sum of, add together all of my terms and divide by the number of terms. So we're going to be saying 2 plus 5 plus 5 plus 6 plus 8 plus 9 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 15 plus 20 plus 26 plus 28 plus 29 plus 30, and then we're going to divide that by the number of numbers. So how many numbers are on our list? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we have 15 numbers on our list. And when we put those together, we get a top line of 219 and a bottom line of 15. And that tells us that our mean here is equal to 14.6. Now, we'll often get a decimal when we're dealing with means, and that's absolutely perfect. And we've used our formula. So our formula was add together all of our terms and divide by the number of numbers that we have. The second thing then we're going to look at is our median. So the first thing for our median is we have to make sure that they're in order from smallest to biggest. So we've already checked that they are. So they're in order from smallest to biggest. So often the easiest way to do it is to start to cross out. So I can say cross out the smallest and the biggest, the second smallest and the second biggest. And I keep going with this pattern until we're left with either one number in the middle or two numbers in the middle. So if I have an even number of numbers, I'd be left with two numbers in the middle. And what I do is add them together and divide by 2. So I find the average of those two numbers in the middle. In this case, we're left with just one number in the middle. So I can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 terms before it, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 terms afterwards. So on this list, our median is going to be the number 12 because that is the middle number. Okay. Another way that we can do that is we can take the number of numbers. So in this case, we have 15 numbers and we can multiply it by a half. So when we multiply 15 by a half, we find 7.5, which means that we're going to find the 8th term on the list. If I get this decimal here, so 0.5, I'm going to round up and find the next term. If I got a whole number here, so if that was number 7, I'd find the average of the 7th and the 8th numbers. Okay, and the 8th term on the list means I could just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to get the same answer here, which is the number 12. The third thing that we're going to find, so that is, number 12. The third thing that we're going to find then is our mode. So our mode is the number that's there the most. So when I look at this list of numbers again, I'll see the number that's there the most is that we have 3 number 12s. So our mode here is going to be number 12. And then we're going to look at our spread. So when we're looking at our spread, we're going to be looking at our range and our interquartile range. So our range is easier to find. It's just going to be the biggest value minus the smallest value. And because these are in order, it's just the last term minus the first term. If they're not in order, make sure you go through your list and find the biggest number and the smallest number, and we subtract them. So that gives us an interquartile range, a range of 28. So the last one we're going to find then is the interquartile range. So the interquartile range is going to be Q3 minus Q1. And the method that we used here to find the median of multiplying by a half is going to give us a quick way to find what's 3/4 and 1/4 of the way. So 3/4 multiplied by the 15 numbers that we have gives us an answer of 11.25. So again, we have a decimal here, so we're going to find the 12th number on the list. So we just count from the beginning because they're in order from smallest to biggest. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's number 26. And then we want to find 1/4. So 15 multiplied by 1/4 gives me 3.75. So we're going to find the 4th number on the list. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the number 6. So that's going to be our Q1. So our interquartile range is going to be Q3, which is 26, minus Q1, which is 6, which gives us an interquartile range of 20. Okay, so now that we have our terms, we're going to go and look at a couple of questions from the papers and see how these questions come up. So the first question we're going to look at here is 2015 paper 2 question 9b. So this question says the heights of a random sample of 1,000 students were collected and recorded. Right, so we want to look at this question and we'll just get it to fit onto the screen for us. Okay, so the sample of 1,000 students was made up of 500 boys and 500 girls. The data from the 500 girls was used to create the information shown in this table, table number 1. So it says use the information in table 1 to estimate the mean height of the girls using mid-interval values. So here we have a frequency table. So this second line here is going to be our frequency. So it's telling us the number we have in each of these intervals or in each of these classes. So the first one here is that we have grouped here. So this is a grouped frequency table. And we've grouped all the 15 girls that were between 145 centimetres and 150 centimetres tall. So you'll notice that they use a different verb here. They say to estimate the mean height rather than to calculate the mean height. And the reason for that is when we have this grouped frequency table, we're going to use something called your mid-interval values. And your mid-interval values is just going to be what's the average of this interval or this class or this group. And how we find it is we take the starting number and the finishing number and we average them or we find the mean. So we're going to calculate our mid-interval values for each of our intervals here. So we're going to say 145 plus 150 and we'll divide it by 2 and we get 147.5. So that's our mid-interval value for our first interval. And we're going to repeat that for each of these as we go along through the groups. So we'd have 150 plus 155 divided by 2 and that's going to give us 152.5. And we keep going with that the whole way across and we'll get 157.5, we'll get 162.5, we get 167.5, 172.5, 177.5, and 182.5. And you can do out those workings, so there's no problem showing all of those steps, how we find all of those numbers. Once we find that mid-interval value, we're going to use that as the average for this group, and we're going to say, right, we have 15 people, or 15 girls in this case, that have an average height here of 147.5. So we use our mid-interval value. Now, we're going to be using the formula from page 33, the second formula, because we have a frequency table, and this says the sum of the frequency times x over the sum of the frequency. So remember that little E sigma symbol here, the capital sigma, means to sum or to add them together. So we're going to be saying the sum of the frequency times x, because they're touching, over the sum of the frequencies. So we're going to add together your frequencies. So the top line, the sum of the frequencies times x, we're going to use our mid-interval value here as our x. Because we don't have all the list of exactly what height these students are. And that's why we have this estimate word coming into play. So what we'd say here is we have 15 students that are an average height of 147.5. So we say 147.5 multiplied by 15, and we're going to sum them. So we're going to add that to the 48 students that have an average height of 142.5, and we'll add that to the 80 students that have an average height of 147.5, and there's 162.5, there's 112 students in that group, and the 167.5, we have 125 students in that group, and we have 172.5, so we have 81 students in that group, and we have 177.5 with 29 students in that group, and the last group there is 182.5, and we have 10 students in that group. So that's going to give us our top line, and our bottom line here is the sum of the frequencies. So we're just going to add together those frequencies. 15 plus 48 plus 80 plus 112 plus 125 plus 81 plus 29 plus 10. So when our calculator does a lot of this work for us, our top line becomes 82,215 and our bottom line becomes 500. Now we already knew that our bottom line should add up to 500 because it told us up here the data from the 500 girls. So we know that we should be getting 500 on that bottom line. And when we put that into our calculator, we can say that the mean is approximately equal to, and we get 164.43 centimeters. So we're going to put in our units, so it was centimeters. So that's how we use our table, our frequency table, and how we use the formula that goes with our frequency table. But sometimes we're not given all the data, and in that case, we use our mid-interval value. Then there's a couple of theory questions, or the next part is a little bit of a theory question because it's asking me what is the largest possible value for the range. Now we know how to calculate the range, so we said the range is the largest value minus the smallest value, or the biggest value minus the smallest value. So why they're saying here, what is the largest possible value is, I don't know how tall the tallest person is here. I know that there are 10 students that have a height between 180 and 185 centimeters, but they could all be down at this end or they could all be up at this end. I don't know what their heights are. And similarly, I don't know what height the smallest people are here. So 145 to 150, there's 15 people in here, but I don't know what their actual heights are. But the largest possible value that we could have is if we take the biggest value over here and subtract the smallest value over here. So that means we're going to be saying 185 centimeters minus 145 centimeters, and that means that our biggest possible range is 40 centimeters. And the last part of this question says the median height of the girls in the sample is 164.5 centimetres. Explain what this means in the context of the heights of the 500 girls. Now, it's asking in this context, so in the context of their heights. So what a median is, remember the median is the middle when they're in order. So when they're in order from smallest to biggest, we're looking for the middle. So these are in order from smallest to biggest, so we can see that they're going up, and they're telling us that the median is 164.5. Now, that means that this is halfway, which means that 50% of the students are going to have a height that is smaller than that. So 50% smaller and 50% greater. So in the context of the height of the 500 girls, it means there are 250 girls with a height less than 164.5 centimetres and 250 girls with a height greater than. (164.5 centimetres). And where's the 250 coming from? So it's coming from the fact that we have 50% of the 500 students, and this is going to be our halfway mark. So 50% are a height of 164 centimetres or less, and 250 girls have a height of 164.5 centimetres or less, and 250 girls have a height of 164.5 centimetres or more. So it's that is going to be our halfway mark, and that 50% of the students are below that and 50% are above that. The next question we're going to look at then is 2021 paper 2 question 7a, and this question here we also see that we have a grouped frequency table. So I can see again that we have age groups on the top, and this time our frequency is going to be a percentage. So remember, the bottom line here is going to be my frequency, so it's the percentage of subscribers. So this question says the following table shows the age profiles of all of the people in Ireland aged between 15 and 65 who subscribed to an online streaming platform. So our groups are 15 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 45, 45 to 55, and 55 to 65. And it says down here, note 25 to 35 means 25 years or over, but less than 35 years. So if you're 35, you move into this group. If you're less than 35, but between 25 and 35, you'd be in this group. And that's what that note there means. It's explaining how the data works for us. So we have this grouped frequency table, and the first part of the question that we're looking at says, in a survey of 1,000 subscribers aged between 15 and 65, how many people would you expect to be between 25 and 55 years? So what we're looking at here, and what's important to note, is that this is the percentage of subscribers. So it's not a number of subscribers, it's the percentage of subscribers, and we're looking over here at how many people out of the 1,000 subscribers. So we're going to work out, well, what percentage are between 15 and 65? So when we look at the table, we have, between 25 and 55. So when we look at the table, the subscribers that are between 25 and 55 are in this group, and in this group, and in this group. So we have 3 groups here that makes up all the subscribers between 25 and 55. So we're going to be saying 27% and 25% and 16%. So when we add those together, that is a total of 68% of all the subscribers. So we're saying 68% of the subscribers fall between 25 and 55 years old, and we want to know, out of 1,000 subscribers, how many would you expect to be in this age group? So we're going to take this 1,000 subscribers and we're going to multiply by 68%, and that would be 680 people. So we would be expecting 680 people out of those 1,000 subscribers to be between the ages of 25 and 55. For part 3, it says use the table or the histogram to write down the age group which contains the median age. Now, we don't have a histogram drawn here, so we're only going to use the table to write down the age group which contains the median. So the median, remember, is going to be our middle. So we're looking for our middle value when they're in order from smallest to biggest. So when we have a grouped frequency table like this, they're going to be in order from smallest to biggest. So that means that we're looking for what's halfway. Now, this time it was a percentage, so we're looking for half of 100%, which is going to be 50%. So we're looking for which interval does 50% lie in, as in when we're adding up to 50%. Now that's important because when I look at these, none of these figures have the number 50 in them. I'm not looking for one that contains 50% of the data. I'm looking for the one that is going to have the 50% person. So the subscriber that has 50% of the data younger than them and 50% of the data older than them, that 50% person, where are they? So when I look at this data, there's 24% in here. So that means that the 50% isn't in there. And we'd add on the next piece. So when we add on the next piece, these two intervals here are going to have 51% of the data. So because we're reaching 51% here, it means that the 50% has to be in this interval. So in the interval between 25 and 35 is going to contain this 50% person. So 50% of the people from here down and 50% of the people from here up. That means that the median is going to be in this interval here. So that's our answer from the table. So the age group is going to be 25 to 35. And the last thing that we're asked is to use our mid-interval values again. So to remind you, our mid-interval values, we find them by adding together the ends of the intervals. So we'd say 15 plus 25 and then dividing by 2. So my first mid-interval value is going to be 20. We do that the same for each of them and we get 30, 40, 50, and 60, and we use those mid-interval values using our sum of the frequency times x over the sum of the frequency. So that's the formula that we're going to use. So we're going to be saying there are 24 people or percent of people that have an average of age of 20, and 27% that have an average age of 30, and 25% that have an average age of 40, and 16% that have an average age of 50, and 8% that have an average age of 60. So that's going to be our top line. And then we're going to be dividing by the sum of the frequencies. So the frequencies were 24 plus 27 plus 25 plus 16 plus 8. And the sum of the frequencies should be 100 because it's 100%. So our top line here is 3,570 and our bottom line is 100, which means that we're going to estimate our mean to be approximately equal to 35.7 years old. Okay, so hopefully this lesson was of some use to you in looking at means, modes, medians, interquartile range and range. And don't forget there's 2 videos for you there to look back over, one on the median and one a worked example from the papers. Thanks.